Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do a tag video because I was very kindly tagged to do this video by Laurent Macquart from Reading with Macquart. I will link her video in the description box, but we're going to get into this really quickly because I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. And yet at the same time, not as much, so you'll see what I mean. But basically today's tag is about backlisted books, and it's asking you to sort of reflect on the idea of, do you read backlisted books? What do you consider to be backlisted books? What books you want to read, etc., etc. And this video, I actually thought it was going to be really straightforward to do, but as I thought more about it, it wasn't as straightforward, and it's actually I'm kind of conflicted on a bit of the questions. So I'm going to be combining questions, rearranging questions, and just kind of probably stumbling my way through this video. And I have a lot of books laid out in front of me as potential examples. So it's chaos. It's going to be chaos probably. But let's start with the first question of, do you read backlisted books? And like I said, originally it was like, oh yeah, I definitely read backlisted books. But then I thought about it, because the second question is, what is your definition of a backlisted book? And for me, it was just, my original idea was just a backlisted book is any book that was published before the most current book. So that makes sense when you're talking about authors who are still publishing books. So for example, do I even have a for example? So for example, and this is if you're dealing with books in translation, Hiroko Oyamada, her most latest book translated into English is The Factory. So if you were to read her backlisted book, it would be the English translation of The Whole, okay? So that makes sense. But then when you're talking about authors that, where is it? Where did I put it? Should be, okay, it's right in front. Here we go. So then if you're talking about authors who don't write anymore, well, in that case, when you put into perspective that you're talking about the present and they've already finished their body of work, then according to your present, every book of theirs is backlisted. So then I think you would have to change the definition to where the backlisted work would be any work that isn't their major work. So for example, Larry McMurtry, for me, his most famous work is Lonesome Dove. So any book of his that he writes that isn't Lonesome Dove would be a backlisted work, right? Just the fact that he wrote in the past does not mean that all his books are backlisted. So that's for me, like, kind of where I think I fall with my definition. So it makes it hard, because then the next question is, name a backlisted novel that you love. Well, some people are saying backlisted is just kind of whatever was written 50 years ago. Well, in that case, the backlisted book that I love is Lonesome Dove. He doesn't write currently. There are no more works coming out. So Lonesome Dove would be a backlisted work, but it's his most famous work, so that just seems obvious, you know? It's just not, it's not like, it's like, oh, what's a backlisted work? Oh, I love Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Well, no, that's not really a backlisted work. That's Victor Hugo's most famous book. So, you know, so I can't choose Lonesome Dove. I want to choose Lonesome Dove as my most favorite backlisted book that I love, but I don't think this counts. So I think for it to really count, I would have to choose something else. So for example, Cormac Mccarthy. Cormac Mccarthy, most famous works, I would say, are The Road and All the Pretty Horses. And then you could probably consider Blood Meridian as the top three. But I feel like the other two, especially since All the Pretty Horses is studied in school, in many schools. I did read that in high school. I think, and then The Road was made a movie, so people are pretty familiar with that one. But yeah, so those are his famous works. So for example, Backlisted, when I wanted to read another Cormac McCarthy that wasn't those three, I chose Child of God, which is definitely a work that is less known of his, and it actually is much more kind of hated. And as I've heard it's quite a hated book, but I actually think this is my favorite of his. I really enjoyed this. But I mean, it's about a rapist, so I mean, saying that my favorite book of his is a book about a rapist is kind of weird, but you know, it's just how he portrays the character that really makes me like this book. So yeah, so I really think a backlisted book in my case would have to be a book that is not the most famous book in the author's body of work. So for more examples, see, I'm jumping back. More examples would be Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick's a science fiction writer, and his most famous body of work would most likely be Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which I have not read, but I have read Ubik. So Ubik would be a backlisted work because it's not as famous as that one. Again, Nyugiwa Tiongo, I think his most famous book would be Petals of Blood, but I read The River Between and not Petals of Blood, so that would be a backlisted work. Although it's interesting because is it a backlisted work for me? Because this is the only book I've read by this author. So technically, any book past before this would be a backlisted work, right? No, maybe, kind of. We see where I'm getting at. But yeah, no, I think I would consider this a backlisted work. It's not their most famous work, so it's backlisted. Again, William Golding. William Golding is most famous for Lord of the Flies. So once you've read Lord of the Flies, if you go read another book by William Golding, The Spire would be my choice. The Spire was so good, by the way. I really, really love this book. I loved the gothic themes behind it, and the the passion and the portrayal of our main character as he goes into utter delusion and paranoia and just, you know, flights of fantasy of just, you know, believing that he has to fulfill God's work, even though that is mostly a delusion. Anyway, we're getting out of track, but I really love The Spire. But this would be a backlisted book that I love. There we go. Backlisted book that I love would be The Spire by William Golding. Because Lord of the Flies is his most famous work. So one of those questions then would be name a backlisted novel that you love. So I mentioned some fiction books. So then it's asking me about backlisted nonfiction that I love. So once again, we come into the same issue where I really like John Krakauer's Into Thin Air. So if you're considering that backlisted nonfiction would be anything that was written in the past that's not a current publication, it would be this. But this is his most famous work. So I'm not going to choose this, even though I love this. Absolutely love this, but I can't choose this. So maybe I would choose Jonathan D. Spence, The Gate of Heavenly Peace. But the thing is, like, all of his nonfiction works are pretty much equally well known if you know this author. So is it a backlisted book, or is it his most famous book, or is it just a very good representation of the quality of all of his nonfiction, you know? So not obvious, but I really liked both of these, you know, to put it out there. I do love both of those. So it's not an easy question. Like even the question that's coming up, which is name a backlisted translated book that you love. For me, I have in front of me The Twilight Years by Sawako Ariyoshi. I really absolutely love this book. But, you know, the thing is that it's a translated book, and she doesn't have that much actually translated, like a few other works in English and maybe one extra work that was translated into French, but there's not that much there. So, you know, it would even be hard to get a backlisted book. It might even make sense. It might even like, actually, am I just like giving out books, the name of books that I like, and not really making any sort of social commentary on the idea of backlisted books? At this point, I don't even know. But I mean, I would say her most famous book, even more so than this one, would be The River Key, which I actually haven't read, and I really do want to read, because I've just been reminded that The River Key exists, and I do want to read that. So I don't know. I think my most famous translated book would be this. But here's the issue with this question. I read in a lot of other languages. I can read in French, I can read in Spanish, and I can read in Japanese. So for me, you know, there are a lot of books that I read in the original language that I would recommend the translated version of, because I want you guys to read those books. And if you don't have access to the original language, then you need to read the translated work. So it's just like, it's not really fair for me to pin out just one book when really I could tell you, you know, Jules Verne, read the backlist work, but it's not for me. Jules Verne is not a translated piece of work. It's the original language. It's French. It's my native language. So it's hard. I feel like a lot of times these tags are really are created or have been created very often by native English speakers who only speak English. So, which is another thing, you know, I think could be put under discussion. But I think it, like, I know there's this one book game, which was, it asks questions and you have to find the books in your bookshelves, and you have to do it within a little time limit. And I watched the video and I was like, oh, that could be fun. Maybe I should do that. And the very first question was, pull out a piece of translated fiction. I'm like, okay, that's my whole bookshelf. The second question was, pull a book from a different country. And I'm like, well, that's my entire bookshelf. And I was just like, this is so, I mean, this video for me, it's over in 5 seconds because, you know, I don't only speak English and I don't only read in English. So I don't know. Maybe I've gone on a tangent, but it is what it is. That's how I feel about this tag. Like, it's really weird. I was super excited about doing this tag, and I really thought I could go somewhere with it, but I'm really torn. But anyway, let's continue, because I did pull out a lot of books and I have to remember why. But yeah, next question technically is, name an author you have read all the backlist from. I don't have one that I've read all the backlist from yet. I'm very close on a few. One of them would be Stefan Zweig, who is an Austrian author that I absolutely adore. This is an author I've read all of his most famous works, and all I have left are his backlisted works. So all of his short stories I have to read. Not all, but I have quite a few that I still have left to read, a few of his novellas. I think there's only one book, which I'm confused as to whether I've read or not. It's called The Post Office. It was translated to The Post Office Girl in English. And I don't know if I've read that one yet before, because I don't recall if it just doesn't maybe have a different title. But anyway, I've pretty much read all of his works. And then Kobo Abe is another author that I've read pretty much almost everything, I think. Or I thought I did. So I have The Ruined Map here. This is a book that I have not read yet. I thought this was the last one translated that I have to read, but it turns out I have another one called Enter Ice Age 4, which I never see in the bookstores, which is why I forgot. But I've read everything else by him. I've Kangaroo Notebook, Art Sakura, Secret Rendezvous, The Boxman, Face of Another. I've read The Woman in the Dunes. I've read all those. So I only have this and Enter Ice Age 4, and that leaves me with just two that have not been translated into English yet. One of them is called Kabe, which is the wall. And this is actually some short stories or novella. So it has the Kabe, and then it also has the shorts or the novella that actually won him the Akutagawa Prize, which was his debut novel, and it's the thing that started his career. And that's Eskarumashi no Hanzai. So karma's crime, which has never been translated in English. So yeah, once I've read these, I'll be done with him, unfortunately, because I love his works. But yeah, I'm almost done with Stefan Zweig, and I'm almost done with Kobo Abe. Then I mean, some like Hiroko Oyamada is a recent author, and she's only done 4 books, and I've read Anna, The Whole, and I've read The Factory. So I would have to do the backlist, which would be her first one, which is called The Garden, I think. And then she just published a new book in Japanese recently, which is called, I forget now. It's either Little Bird or Little Island, and the fact is that she sent a tweet in that, which is the reason I'm confused right now. So the kanji, the Japanese character for bird and island, are very similar looking. There's only one spot where there's a difference, and she sent out a tweet saying that, you know, thank you for promoting my book, but you put the wrong word. And because of that tweet, I'm now confused as to which is the right one. But in any case, this is, I'm almost, in a way, I've read half of her works. There's only 2 more. But yeah, I don't know. Where am I going with this? I'm telling you, this video is chaos. And I think I'm pretty much just trying to answer the next question, which is name an author you want to read all of the backlist from. So, I mean, I guess in that sense, one author would be Akira Yoshimura, who I've pretty much, I think, as far as I can tell, I've almost read all of his books out in translation. There's a few more that I can see now that I flipped through these. I think there's just 3 more in French that I can read, and after that I'll be done. But so then I'll have to read his books in Japanese, which frightens me because he's probably above my level. I don't know. I have this one, Ten ni Asobu, which has not been translated into any language as far as I'm aware, but he has so many books that have not been translated yet. It's crazy. When I look at the shelves at the bookstore, there are so many. And once I start reading Japanese, I think this will be the one, because this looks like the easiest to read out of all the ones I looked at. But yeah, Akira Yoshimura, for sure, one of my favorite authors. We'll definitely be reading all of his books once I develop the ability to read all of his books. Let's see, Amélie Nothomb, even though she frustrates me to no end, I still read her books. I've read about 19 of them. I think there are about 26 or so out now. I don't know, she writes one every year. But they're so small, I don't want to pay like the import price, so I have to wait till I go back to France so I can buy them. But yeah, Amélie Nothomb is probably an author that I will more or less probably read all of her books. Then Akira nope, that's not what I want to say. Ryu Murakami is an author that I would definitely probably read. So like I have in the Miso Soup that I've read recently. Audition I read like 2 years ago. But all of his books are so unique, so they're really fun to, you know, delve into and see, okay, maybe this one I don't like as much, but this one I do. So because he gives so much variety, it's really fun to delve into his work. So I think he's one I would probably read. Victor Hugo. I love Victor Hugo, and I haven't read him in a long time, but I do love Victor Hugo. These are 2 books on my TBR, 93 and Les Travailleurs de la Mer. Les Travailleurs de la Mer I had even started, but I had to stop for no reason. But I love Victor Hugo. My favorite of his is probably L'Homme qui rit, which is The Man Who Laughs, which is so dark, just pure dark humor and like gritty and really, really fantastic. And I also like his Dernier jour d'un condamné, so The Last Days of a Condemned Man, which is one of his shortest works. It's only like 150 pages or so that I remember, and that one's fantastic. Also very dark humor, not dark as much as The Man Who Laughs, which is a different kind of darkness, but just dark humor, sarcastic, like it really pulls at you, pulls your leg in many places. But Victor Hugo is definitely an author that I am pushing through his body of work because I absolutely love him. When it comes to nonfiction, John Krakauer, I definitely want to read more. I have on my TBR Under the Banner of Heaven. This is definitely one book that I want to get to quite soon. Barbara Dimick, I loved her Nothing to Envy about North Korea, and I loved Eat the Buddha was about a Tibetan town. And so she has her 3rd book, which was I think her first one, is called something in Sarajevo, neighborhood in Sarajevo or something like that. Logavina Street, Life and Death in a Sarajevo Neighborhood, which is definitely one I will probably pick up because I love her writing. She has really great nonfiction. And then a recent read, The Hidden History of Burma, A Crisis of Race and Capitalism by Tant Minh. He has 2 other books, 2 other nonfictions about Burma that I'm very interested in reading. So when it comes to reading the backlist, you know, Barbara Dimick and him would be quite simple for me to complete. Is this, I don't know. Is this interesting? I don't even know. I am adding a question, however, that was not in the original video, which is I wanted to add backlist authors that you will no longer finish. So for me, back in the day, I used to read a lot of Isabel Allende. So on my TBR, I have Ritirato in Sepia, which turns out I've already read in French, Retrait en Sepia. But I bought the Spanish version, and I do still want to read this just to sort of refresh my Spanish. But Isabel Allende, like, I really, really loved her back in the day. But then her books just, you know, as I read more of her current releases, they just became so formulaic and always the same book. It's always about, you know, it's a very important subject, but it's always about a girl who's a slave or, you know, some sort of puppet of machismo, and she has to, like, get out of her situation, and she falls in love with a man, and, you know, stuff like that. It's just become so formulaic that I will, as originally back in the day, I thought I would read all of her work, but I've given up on that idea. I'll just pick and choose every once in a while if the mood takes me in that direction. Another author I thought I would read all of his works is Romain Gary. Romain Gary I do love. I mean, his book, oh my god, Racine du Ciel is The Roots of Heaven is absolutely beautiful. I mean, do I remember enough about the synopsis to be able to tell you? But it just follows like a man he's either hunting the elephants in Africa or he's trying to protect the elephants in Africa from hunting. I don't remember which one it is, but it is absolutely beautiful. And so because of that, I really thought I was going to read a lot of his works. I did read a few of his other ones, and I love them just as much. But the rest of his books are very much World War II heavy. And when it comes to the European role in World War II, I'm kind of over that, or I'm just kind of quite tired of the topic. So I don't really see me finishing his body of work. I do have this on my TBR, which is Le Vin est Mort, which I don't believe has been translated into English. But yeah, this is about Germany and the World War II. But I thought I would, like, every once in a while, it's okay. So I thought, and if I'm going to read a World War II book with Europe as the center, Europe as a focus, it might as well be Romain Gary, because he is a very, very beautiful author. But yeah, I don't think I would read more of him. But I don't know, to go back into more backlist authors I would finish, because I see in front of me one, or not even that, I missed Luc Lisieux is definitely, this is the only, I've read 2 books of him, a famous one called L'Africain, and then this is a backlist book called Peuple du Ciel, but reading this definitely makes me want to read more of him. Will I read all of his works? I don't know. But I have discovered that I am very much into his writing. So I am tempted to read more of his books, and we'll see if that turns into a desire to read all of his books. See, I'm all chaotic because I didn't know what order to do things. And so now it's kind of, I don't know, like, I mentioned Victor Hugo as an author that I want to read all the books, and I forgot to mention Jules Verne. I mean, how can I forget to mention Jules Verne? That's just preposterous. This is only a sample of all the Jules Vernes that I have. The top 3 being books that I've already read. These 3 down here are on my TBR. But yeah, I mean, how can I forget to mention Jules Verne? He's right in front of me, and it's just, this video is chaos. It's chaos, 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 chaos. But yeah, Jules Verne, definitely want to read all of his books in this series, which is about like 40 of them. And then I could mention Zola. See, there's so much to mention. So backlisted books, I don't know, it's lost all meaning for me. It's entirely lost whatever meaning it had. I don't know. And so yeah, that leaves us with the last question. Name a backlisted book that you think will become a classic, and that brings us right back to the original definition. I mean, if it's just like a book that isn't the main, a backlisted book is a book that isn't the main most famous book of the author. So for me, like, I think Lonesome Dove will become a classic 100 years from now, 200 years. I really do believe this would become a classic. But it's not a backlisted book. It's his most famous work. So obviously, out of all the books in his in his work, in his body of work. This, if any of the books became a classic, it'd be this one. It wouldn't be a backlisted book. So I really think that's a weird question. I mean, why would a backlisted book, a book that's not the most famous work, become the classic instead of the work that's the most famous, right? Right? So I mean, because like if you just say a backlisted book is a book that was written in the past, right? A book that isn't a current book, what's going to be a classic? Then yeah, Lonesome Dove is going to be a classic. I really think Hiroko Oyamada's could be a classic. The Whole, I love this book. I think it could become a really understated classic. Twilight Years, where did I even put that book? It's somewhere in front of me, but I won't find it. But the Twilight Years, I think, where is Twilight Years? Where is it? Where did you go? Where could it have gone? You know, it could become a classic. So there we go. This video is chaos. I don't know if I answered any questions or if I've overly answered the questions. It's really gloomy outside. I'm losing my light. It's almost time. If you made it this far, congratulations. You are a brave person. You have spirit and you have energy, and you might have too much time on your hands. I'm just gonna say it. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you in my next video, whatever chaos that might be. Bye.